Good evening, Sabah, Malaysia, and the world. My name is Philip Golingai, and I'll be the moderator today for the online forum, which is organized by Kupi-Kupi FM, which is an awesome radio station in Sabah, and also by Sabah Way Forward. Okay, today our forum, the title will be UNICEF and Sabah's Mother and Children. And I would like to introduce our panelists. Okay, first one will be Zoe Gunn, and then she is the hi, she's the Gender and Disability Program Specialist for UNICEF Malaysia and also Brunei Darussalam. And then our next panelist is Dr. Elaine Kong. She's the program specialist in Sabah. She's also with UNICEF, Malaysia, and Brunei Darussalam. Okay, the third speaker is Jennifer Lasimbang. She's a Sabah activist, and she's also the former Moyog assemblyman. She's my YB because I'm from Moyog, Tinampang. So hello YB, and then hello Dr. Elaine, and hello Zoe. Okay, we go straight to the first question. Okay, first question will be on to Jennifer. Jennifer, you've been as an activist, you've been you have gone through the whole Sabah. From your you also were with UNICEF and also United Nations on the ground. Plus, as a politician, you know Sabah very well. Okay, from going on the ground, what's the situation for mothers and children in Sabah? Jennifer?
Yeah. Thanks, Philip. Thank you, Kupi-Kupi FM. Hi, everybody. Kopi Bosian, and thank you for the question. Yeah. I did quite a bit of work on the ground, not just with UNICEF and then UNDP at the same time. And I was a lecturer in UMS doing quite a bit of a study, IT studies, lah. But it brought me around Sabah a lot. And I think just generally speaking, before the pandemic, 2 years of COVID-19, we already know that Sabah has a lot of the social disparity of Sabah, inequities compared to the rest of the federation. We know that some of the poorest regions and also areas are in Sabah. We know where they are, um, and I saw recently, not quite recent, 2018, there was a study done by UNICEF on situation analysis in Malaysia, and Sabah's urban and rural poverty rate is 4 to 13 times, depending on the area, of the national average. So we know that Sabah has a lot of disparity socially, economically. But I think during the pandemic, because during that time I was still was the YB, and I was just looking at how the situation has the COVID-19 has aggravated the situation in Sabah, especially for our mothers and our children. In terms of healthcare, we know that Sabah has the worst in terms of access and the quality of healthcare, the infrastructure, our education. Yeah, during my time as the Assistant Minister for Education in Sabah, we see that half of the Sabah schools are actually dilapidated. Many are still, people are still relying on welfare and, aid, not only from the government, but a lot of CSOs, NGOs are coming in to help. So during the pandemic, you can see the situation really aggravated. Some of the families lost their source of income, they lost their jobs. Some families lost their sole breadwinner. And, it has changed a lot of lives. As for the children, we know that Sabah, there's so many dark black spots. We cannot get access to internet and no mobile service. Children are unable to go to school at that time, right? So they have to learn at home, and you've seen pictures of pondok, done in the middle of nowhere, where they can get some access. And of course, in terms of affordability, buying devices for them to continue their online learning. I was speaking to some of the officers in different districts where only 50% of children are actually able to have access. Either they don't have the internet access or mobile service, or they don't have the devices to continue the online learning. So there's a huge gap. Yeah, there's a huge gap that we will have to do a lot of remedial classes, and even as simple as nutrition. There are a lot of children in Sabah who goes to school because there's RMT, the Rancangan Makanan Tambahan. There's free food provided in the school, and they really look forward to go to school because there's proper nutritious food provided at school. So all that, the last 2 years, those are some of the situation on the ground that I see, I hear, I talk to parents, I talk to the community. So I think that's enough for your questions to start with, Philip. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jennifer, for giving us an insight on how was the situation in Sabah and especially during the pandemic. Yeah, this situation sounds bad. Okay, we go to the next question, and then it will be answered by Dr. Elaine Pong. We will have two questions actually. Okay, first question will be, I'll ask the first question first. Okay, Dr. Elaine, what is the overall purpose of UNICEF mission in UNICEF Malaysia's mission in Sabah? Just give us an overall picture. Thanks so
All
much.
right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Philip, for the introduction. I'm trying to answer will be on most recent and then to an overall macro perspective of the mission of UNICEF Malaysia in Sabah. So recently, as early as last week, there was a team effort by UNICEF Malaysia, the program and communications team, who was on a mission to deliver equipment worth 627,000 to the ONG wards across 5 hospitals in Sabah, and including hard to reach areas. So I'll explain that in a while. And this is part of the intervention that UNICEF Malaysia has been working tirelessly since COVID pandemic to reduce the impact of the pandemic on children, and also to help strengthen health facilities across Malaysia for mothers and children. So the equipment for this mission was delivered to Tawau Lahad Datu, Duchess of Kent in Sandakan, the Sabah Women and Children Hospital in Likas, and Turning Out, in that order. So a team of us actually went right across the state from east to west. So this exercise was planned and coordinated together with the Medical Development Division of the Ministry of Health Malaysia, and of course the Sabah State Health Department. And through this, we managed to engage with health officers of various levels to hear about their challenges, and also some mothers from the wards. So I'd like to also explain on the macro view of UNICEF Malaysia. May I have the slide one, please? Slide number 1. So you see, in Malaysia, because Malaysia is a upper middle income country status, we actually focus more on programs of policy recommendation and capacity building. So unless during emergencies such as this pandemic, where we actually do equipment delivery and supplies to help the ministries who are working so hard as well. So basically, this medical equipment was delivered to complement efforts by the Ministry of Health to provide the adequate medical care for mothers and children. And so the hospital selected was for rural areas and also where communities are most marginalized. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Lane. We have a second part to the question. Okay, what are the some of the main findings of the UNICEF mission?
Okay, so if you can still have the slide one, please, where we saw that Sabah actually has, if you can see, 10 tourist locations, 8 are based in Sabah. So we couldn't go to all, obviously, but we did try to at least cover some of them. And by talking to the mothers and the officers in the hospitals and also public health centers, we managed to understand that there are disparity, as what YB Jan Nasibang have said, that access to basic healthcare services, there's a big disparity, because for those without documents, they are charged much higher fees, and this is actually quite a burden on them, and thus we can say is a unequitable access. Yeah. And the other thing that we found out was, later we will elaborate on this, but YB Jennifer did say also poor nutrition. So we found that mothers, maybe because of the pandemic, the loss of livelihood, but also sometimes is unaware of nutrition, like what should be good for them as mothers, to be able to have proper breastfeeding milk for children, for their babies, and also because they are not so aware of balanced diet and all that. So we realize that poor nutrition is something that we definitely need to address. And also the access to health service as mentioned, because of the disparity in fees as well. And to echo what YB Jan also said about education. So these are some of the things we can confirm from the Sitan that she mentioned as well from the 2018. Some of the areas that we did not manage to cover this time, but we hope to ask more in future, would be about mental health and violence and neglect of children. That was something that around district we couldn't, but we would actually welcome if since I'm the program specialist for Sabah, anyone listening to this and has stories would like to share with us, please do so. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Elaine, for giving us a bit of an insight on my state. We'll go next to Zoe Gan. Okay, the question for you is, and I would like, first of all, I would like to say thanks to UNICEF for donating and helping my state, that is Sabah. Okay, what I understand is last week there was an event in Api-Api for the formal opening of the Pusat Activity Kanak-Kanak, which is the Kota Kinabalu Children Activity Center. Can you tell us more? I'm curious to know what is this center and how does it help Sabahans?
Sure, no problem. So I'm going to rewind a little bit to tell you a little about where this program and pilot started. So in February 2020, so this is going back 2 years, UNICEF and JKM Sabah partnered to pilot a children's activity center in Kota Kinabalu, like the city of Kota Kinabalu. And we envisaged the center would be a place that would be open to all children, including those who are undocumented and in street situations. Now, initially, the center aimed to provide a child-friendly, inclusive, and above all, safe place for children to gain access to basic health, sanitation, and education services. And at the same time, we felt the center should also be providing opportunities for children to play and have recreational activities. So we also tried to establish a toy library in the center as well. Now, that's what we aim in the very first instance. But longer term, we hope that the center can develop into more of a holistic services space, where children can access counseling as well as child protection mechanisms, which is something that Dr. Elaine mentioned earlier. And that could include identification, screening, and referrals to other services. So it's more than just a space to play. Moving forward, it's a space where a lot of things can happen and a lot of access to other types of services. Now, why have we placed it in KK? And why are we kind of focusing on children in street situations? Well, it's really important to note here that being in street situations places children at far greater risk of violence, abuse, and also poor physical and mental health. They also have really limited access to safe spaces to learn, play, and interact with other children. And whilst we were in Sabah last week, we heard commonly comments about the fact that many Sabahans are really concerned about these children wandering around the streets and some of the antisocial behaviors that they're getting involved in. It's a real concern. What are they doing? Why are they there late at night? Who's taking care of them? So really, ultimately, those children have no access to services that can support them to reach their full potential, to thrive, to develop, to participate in society on an equal basis with other peers of the same age who are not in street situations or are not undocumented. Now, 2 years ago, when we first came up with the concept of piloting this activity center, we were also struck by the COVID-19 pandemic, and it struck Sabah with a vengeance. And unfortunately, the pilot project was severely delayed. We were aiming to launch it 2 years ago. So in the 2 years between COVID-19 hitting Malaysia, we weren't sitting idly. We took this time to identify a really appropriate space right in the city, very close to Api-Api area where there was a high population of children on the street. And we renovated it, made it fit for purpose, put things in like ample storage, a kitchen and dining area, designated play and learning and resting areas for children of all different types of ages, of all different types of needs and abilities. We felt it was really very important to ensure that the space was accessible. So we conducted an accessibility audit, fitted ramps, installed slightly modified toilets and washroom areas, so that children and adults with who were potentially wheelchair users or had limited mobility could also enter the center as easily as everyone else. So I'm really excited that last week we finally got to open the Children's Activity Center. And it's kind of corresponding with Malaysia's successful response and also the beginning of our recovery from the devastating effects of COVID-19. We felt that it was a perfect time. You know, this decision wasn't made on our own. It was with JK and Sabah as well. We were confident that the infection risks were lower and that the strict Ministry of Health SOP recommendations could be implemented in the center with a finite group of children, so that we could also keep the risk of COVID-19 transfer amongst children visiting the center very low, if at nothing. So just to finish off answering this question, because I know I've talked a lot, the Children's Activity Center is now under the jurisdiction of JK and Sabah. And it is run by their child protection team, and they have 3 dedicated and highly trained staff. And the centre can, at full capacity, accommodate 30 children at one time, and that's maintaining social distancing and all of the other SOPs that are put in place to keep them safe. So the opening of the centre was a huge and long-awaited milestone for JKM Sabah, for UNICEF Malaysia, and for the children in street situations in and around the city of Kota Kinabalu. And I also feel that it's a really huge milestone for Sabahans as well, and the citizens of Kota Kinabalu, because the people that we spoke to when we were on our mission last week, they're not in that space where they're annoyed or frustrated by these children. There's real concern. There's real concern that they want to be able to provide something for them, and there's an understanding that we're not necessarily in the space where they can join the mainstream system yet. So this is a step towards the right direction. It's a small step, but that's where we have to start, and hopefully we move on to something bigger in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Zoe. Don't go away. I still got a second question for you. Okay, among the work that is done by UNICEF in Sabah, is there anyone that you want to highlight? Maybe 1 or 2 or 3 that that you want to talk about? Thanks.
Yeah, I'm going to focus on one. It's quite a large project and complex, so I think I only have time for one. This is a particular program that I have a privilege to oversee in partnership with Special Olympics Sabah and also Special Olympics Asia Pacific. And we've been collaborating with them for over 3 years now on a number of activities linked to children with intellectual disabilities and their families in Sabah. YB Jen is nodding her head because she was very integral in the first very early beginnings of our relationship, 3-4 years ago. So our activities now and during COVID-19 were very much focused on young children between the ages of 2 and 7, and also their siblings with and without disabilities and their parents. The overarching objectives of the program have primarily focused on sport and health education interventions as a tool to promote inclusion, healthy living, and social interactions between children with and without intellectual disabilities. Ultimately, we aim to increase positive perception of children with intellectual disabilities in Sabah, and also at the same time, reduce the stigma and discrimination that they face on a daily basis. So I just want to talk a little bit about or place children with disabilities in the world and in the space that we have in Malaysia and also Sabah. So the world that we live in has many, many barriers for children and people with disabilities. Speaking from a personal perspective, I identify as a person with disabilities, and I can say that there are very many barriers that I face every day. Although the people with disabilities and children with disabilities face a lot of barriers, they are in fact actually the largest minority group in Malaysia and across the world. And they are constantly left out of mainstream services, subjected to negative attitudes, and often they're unable to participate in society. And the reason why they're the largest minority group is that children and people with disabilities cut across every minority group that we have in our country and globally. So when we talk about children in street situations, there will be children with disabilities there. When we talk about children in our rural communities, there will be children with disabilities there. And they're always, very often, the very last ones that we see and the very last ones that we think about. So as you can imagine, when COVID-19 struck, children with disabilities, especially those with intellectual disabilities, were amongst the most impacted and the most vulnerable in our country. And we know that Sabah was hit so hard right at the very beginning and has done a tremendous job to kind of recover and pull back. And they were already experiencing extreme marginalization, isolation, and lack of access to mainstream services, but the pandemic served to only exacerbate these challenges and create even more for them. So when COVID struck, we were already running a program with Special Olympics, but we quickly had to adapt all of our activities because they were all traditional, kind of out in schools, in community centers, and really trying to bring the community together. And obviously that wasn't possible during lockdown. So we adapted everything to online, digital, radio platforms, which has many, many challenges. Challenges in lack of connectivity, the lack of access to digital devices, and also the lack of understanding of how to use them. Even if you were lucky enough to get hold of one, maybe somebody lent you one, you were donated, or you had one at home. People just weren't used to being able to use them daily, day in and day out, to access Zoom or to access any kind of education online. So it was a really, really big challenge. But we managed to overcome that and continue to support or provide support and access to health and education services throughout the pandemic. At the same time as targeting children with intellectual disabilities, we also realized when everybody's at home, their siblings also needed support, and their parents really, really needed extra support. Because not only were they juggling trying to work from home, trying to keep a job, trying not to lose a job, homeschooling, and all the daily struggles and juggling acts that you have to do as a parent, they were also trying to support their child with a disability. And there are many challenges with having a disability, on top of the fact that you're locked down and you can't access the support that perhaps you might have had from other family members or other interventions or therapies that you might be able to access on a normal basis. That just wasn't available during the lockdowns. So we developed healthy family forums that were designed to equip parents with coping skills and also to provide them some psychosocial and mental health support. And then also connect parents together, because that's a really important aspect. That peer support really helps you to feel less alone and isolated. So we ran that also during the, up until now even. The adapted program was a huge success. That we learned a lot from it. There were so many things that we could have done better in hindsight. And if we ever go into any kind of global pandemic, we will do it so much better. We really hope we don't have to. But we managed to reach many children with intellectual disabilities across Sabah, and we managed to ensure that even though we were all isolated and all excluded, we all had to experience that, they didn't have the same levels that they would have had we not been able to provide the program that we were running. So that was a real win for us. But one thing that we did learn was that globally and in Malaysia, that there's very little data on children with intellectual disabilities and their families. Because right at the beginning of COVID, when we felt we needed to adapt all of our programming to kind of meet their needs online, we looked around the world and looked to see who else is doing anything, what else can we copy, what can we have inspiration from, and there was very, very little. So what we also decided to do is, at the same time we were running these programs digitally, online, via the radio, we also decided we needed to conduct a study to really understand the impact that COVID-19 was having on this specific group of people and of children. So we worked with Special Olympics again, and also Gaia Teachers Training Institute, to conduct a study that explores the socio-economic, health, and psychosocial impacts of COVID-19 on children with intellectual disabilities and their families. That's a huge mouthful, but I'm going to share with you just a couple of emerging findings. The report hasn't fully been written up yet, and we're hoping that it will be launched probably in the second quarter of this year. But some really key facts here that echo really strongly with YB Jennifer and also with Dr. Elaine's comments. So from our study, we said we kind of could see that, or we were analyzing that 60% of the respondents experienced a decrease in their total household income because of COVID-19. Now we know that this is probably common across the board, but when that household income is decreased and then you add it to the extra cost that disabilities have, like therapy, like reasonable accommodation, assistive software, rehabilitation, things like that, medical in some cases, that's a real huge burden. 40% of respondents experienced increased stress levels, which negatively impacted their mental health. So you can see that mental health issues are really a huge problem for this group. This group and probably many other parents that are experiencing, trying to survive the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns. 31% of our respondents experienced worsened living conditions due to the reduced household income, lack or loss of their job opportunities, as well as the enormous increase in caregiving responsibilities, which also meant that people had to juggle whether or not they could work or not, or how do we stay at home? Kids aren't going to school, somebody has to be at home to look after them, I can't go out to work, or all of these kinds of things that are really, really very difficult to overcome. Now, for the children with intellectual disabilities, they had limited access to internet. Now, we know this is across the board. Malaysia has real spots that are completely kind of dead zones for internet access. And they also had very limited access to digital devices to support their online learning. So this is exacerbated in a household that has less income and is more likely to have lost a job during the pandemic. Children with disabilities were also, if they were lucky enough to have access to the internet and a digital device, they were also unable to equally engage with online learning content because lessons weren't adapted to suit their needs or their level of learning or their level of cognition. So that meant that even if you were able to get online, you just couldn't understand what was going on, and that's so frustrating and that's so disheartening for us as UNICEF, but also as a parent, I guess, just to think you're almost there and you're still being excluded. And finally, parents felt unequipped, ill-equipped, lacking in skills and lacking in confidence to support their child with online education and to support their child with any rehabilitation that they may have wanted to continue during the lockdowns. So really, all of these things are echoing what Dr. Elaine and YB Jennifer was saying, but now we have a study that gives us that data in writing. That's a really powerful tool. Now, the usefulness of data, although none of this might be a surprise, is that it is a tool that we can use, and we have evidence now, and we can adapt. UNICEF will definitely use this to adapt our programming moving forward, but others can use it too, other NGOs and the government. We need to look at evidence like this, and we need to adapt our services, adapt our policies and procedures, and really work together. It's not a one-person problem, and it's not a one-person solution. We have to come together to figure out how to solve this puzzle. So finally, I'm really happy to let you know that we will be launching the study and a series of recommendations, because it's really useful to have data, but then what does that mean? So we are working at the moment with our partners in Sabah, with Special Olympics and other organizations of persons with disabilities to figure out, with all of this impact, what should we do moving forward? And if this happens again, how do we deal with it? And also, if this happens again, how do we mitigate it from happening or getting any worse? So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks Zoe for the insight. Okay, I've got a question for Jennifer, but before that, when Sabah Way Forward and Kupi-Kupi FM asked for her CV and then they sent it to me, I was looking at the CV. Her CV is very impressive. It's rather long, but I'll just only choose four things that the four top things that I saw. Okay, she was a former assistant minister. She was also the former Moyok assemblyman or assemblywoman. But the one that I was very impressed was that she worked for United Nations and also she also worked for UNICEF. So my question for Jennifer is only, and this is non-political. I just want to ask about your two job that is with United Nations and UNICEF. You cannot answer about apa tu when
Politics.
you were assistant minister ataupun assemblyman. Okay, so I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Okay, so how from that two jobs, what was your impression? Maybe you can share with us your experience going on the ground. Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay, thanks, Philip. Yeah, as Zoe was saying, I mean, those are the starting point. Like, for example, Borneo International Marathon was 2016 when we had, I brought in UNICEF to partner with Kinabalu Running Club and to raise awareness about children with different abilities and instead of DIS disability, THIS disability. And we talk a lot about data and the reason why it's so important to have the data so that we can plan better, we can have good strategies, we can develop systems, structures, and very importantly, I think one of the things that I learned, especially with UNICEF, because I was building the partnership for the NGOs, the government for Sabah and Sarawak, that you know it's so important to work with different partners and strategize together because that's the most valuable thing. Some people say, okay, you want to work with the UN agencies, where's the money? It's not about the money, and it's about passionate people like Zoe, Elaine, who actually wants to do something to change and look at an issue and look for the solution, because that's why the data and analysis is so important. So I really look forward to read the report that you've done, the follow-up work that we have done with the many NGOs and CSOs we worked with back in 2016. Now, the two agencies that I work with, I've talked about UNICEF already, and I think one of the things I didn't mention, one of the biggest work we've done in Sabah is actually working with the stateless, undocumented refugees and migrant children, which is actually the biggest. And sometimes people just say it's sensitive, but it's not. We have to deal with it. We have to deal with it because if we don't, the cost of our inaction will be so great in the future. It's like ticking time bomb. We know that. We leave them without identity. We leave them without education, healthcare access. You know where it's going to head. So that's the biggest one, biggest concern when I saw those data. We were churning out of school children reports and all that, working, documenting and mapping of the alternative learning centers in Sabah. There's so many, but I think the basis that I got to work with the UN when I was as a consultant in UNDP Regional Center in Bangkok. At that time, they were going on, the foundation was human rights based approach to development. So it focuses on the most marginalized, excluded segment of the society. That's the and then the universal values. You know why we have to enhance. We have to have an enabling environment for people, equitable. That's when I learned the word equitable, and it's so much needed in Sabah. We need the equitable development in Sabah. And I think the next one was actually empowering people. We can't keep feeding handouts. We need to empower people to understand. And of course, to make that happen, we need that education bit to come in, the exposure. So for me, I feel like I'm very lucky, very privileged to have the experience to work in the regional center with UNDP and as well as great 4 years with UNICEF Malaysia. So many things I've learned. There's a lot of training, right? Actually, one of the things that I use when we had starting flooding in Penampang. Penampang nowadays is very famous, 8 times a year, major flooding. But one of the training that I really, really appreciate was the disaster risk management, and getting the young people to actually be part, lead the disaster risk and preparedness, preparing our communities on what to do when disaster hits and the preparedness bit. Of course, that time I was in KL going for that meeting when the earthquake strike Mount Kinabalu. So, it's a lot of things, and I wish more and more of our Sabahan young people are able to get that kind of training and exposure. Yeah, so it's very important, and the hopefully the values of just the universal values that the UN Charter has, very basic stuff. It's all we can use that in our daily lives, in our work, but hopefully, in the future, like we have more of our young Sabahans who are able to have the opportunity to work with any of the UN agencies. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Jennifer. Jennifer said that it's not about the money, it's about the passion of like people like Dr. Elaine Kong and also Zoe. So Zoe, I have a question for you. How can Sabahans, what you call this, how can Sabahan contribute to UNICEF's mandate to support the rights of mothers and children? And no, the rights of children and women. Thanks.
No problem. So I've got three tips, but I mean, I think these aren't the only things that we could be doing, but they're my three top tips from my personal perspective. So number one would be volunteer your time. I've always volunteered, and since I left high school, I always found time to volunteer an evening, a weekend, things like that. Volunteer your time, but volunteer it responsibly. Research in your local area and find out which NGOs are working there, because they are the experts. And Sabah is not short of experienced, high-quality NGOs. The civil society organization and network is huge and very progressive. So you will not be in the situation where you say there's nobody around here doing anything. There will definitely be somebody around there doing it, and they will be an expert at what they're doing. So first of all, if you have time, volunteer with an NGO that is in your local community. They are the experts. They know the needs of the local population far better than volunteering with UNICEF or any of these other big entities. And they also have the skills to work with language skills or experience of getting physically into a specific location. They have those skills and have experience of doing that for years and years and years. So that's number one. If you have time, volunteer it responsibly with an NGO that knows what they're doing. Number two, if you don't have time, because many of us don't, and I certainly don't have a lot of time now that I work and I'm a mother and a million and one things that I do, look at yourself and what you can do at home or what you can do within work. We can start very small and look at perhaps pre-loved things that we have at home, toys of good quality. It can't be the things that are broken or with clothes with lots of holes in it, but clothes and toys, educational tools that your children potentially have grown out of, books, stationery. If you have things like that at home, then that is the kind of thing that you may be able to identify a NGO that needs those sorts of things or can distribute them to children in perhaps rural communities that may not be able to access those sorts of things. So that's one. But also at the same time, work. A lot of places where we work either already have corporate social responsibility programs, and if they don't, then perhaps that's something that you can maybe trailblaze within your place of work. And see if there are a couple of colleagues that want to come together to be able to do a fundraiser, raise some money or pull together some donations and then do the same. Find an NGO that knows what they're doing it and give it to them. My last thing is it's going to be about money. I know YB Jenna said it's not about money, but sometimes it really is about money. And we need money to get to go to the right place via the right people so that we can really, really maximize what we do for the most vulnerable and marginalized in our communities. So for me, I would recommend, if you do have money, any amount of money, 5 ringgit, 50 ringgit, whatever it is, and you really want to do something useful with that, donate it. Now, this is where I would say donate it to a trusted agency like UNICEF or a big agency that you can trust that the funds will be utilized and channeled in the right direction. So at that point, I would say if you did donate to UNICEF, and I think at some point we're going to share a link on how to do that, you can be really rest assured that the funding that you give, if you specify you want it for children within Malaysia, then that's where it will go, and you can you can trust that that's what it will go to. And if you specify that it's funding that we can use around the world, Malaysia fundraises a huge amount. UNICEF Malaysia does fundraise a huge amount. Most of it stays here, but we do then support other countries that struggle to fundraise because they don't have the same economic development as we do. So those are my 3 top tips. Volunteer your time to a trusted local NGO. Look at what you can do at home or work. Or if you have any money, not many of us do, but if you do have any, please donate it to an agency like UNICEF that you can trust the money will go where it needs to go most. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Zoe. And we stand corrected. It's not only about passion, but also if you can't donate your time, donate your money. It's equally important. Okay, yeah. So something I learned today. Okay, next question will be to Dr. Elaine Kong, and then my question is for UNICEF. What is your next plan, and what's your next engagement for Sabah? Maybe you can explain. Thanks so much.
Right, thanks, Philip. Well, that's quite a lot, but I'll try to summarize it into categories. So you have heard from Zoe about the interventions on disability and the research being conducted. We are also conducting research and design of programs for parents. So parenting program, we are working with LPPKN on that. For education, and YB Jennifer Simbang would be definitely very familiar with this, as she was the initiator when she was the Assistant Minister of Education. With a local film production company and the Gaia Teacher Training Institute, we are developing videos and lessons on global citizenship. So I'm not sure whether some of you know what's global citizenship, but it's a UNICEF program where we define global citizen as someone who understands the interconnectedness, respects, value diversity, and has the ability to challenge injustice and take action in personal, meaningful ways. And that's why we're reaching out to the students, at the schools, and also what we call the alternative learning centers for those who are not able to attend mainstream schools, to share with them and to get their feedback and ideas. Yeah. And the other thing that we are doing to get ideas from young people is actually on environment and climate change. So there is a program for national wide with UNDP, and it's called the YELL program. YELL stands for Youth Environment Living Labs, and you can check out their website. And this is to help the young people develop local resources and tools to promote local climate change initiatives on their own. That's us empowering the youth. So for health, as you have heard, health is a very important area. There's been a successful polio vaccination in Sabah, jointly by WHO, UNICEF, and the Sabah State Health Department. And following on that success, we are now in discussion with Ministry of Health on more immunization programs, so stay tuned. Nutrition, we have already started talking to the Nutrition Department of Sabah, and that's continuing to see how to have a more localized based on the needs of mothers and children in Sabah. So that sort of takes a little bit of time. And for emergency, there was actually just finished, SC Johnson, a corporate donor, actually gave us some funds, and we donated it in the form of hygiene kits to 5,000 children and also beneficiaries of 27,000 family members, because during COVID, not all can afford to buy masks, sanitizers and other for home, so that was part of the hygiene kit, and also dignity like the sanitary pads as well, because sometimes it's very hard, we have heard of period poverty, I'm sure, yeah. And so we are also embarking more on disaster preparedness and response training programs, so that's also in discussion. And for environment, EPD, Environment Protection Department of Sabah, we have already in the last stages of finalizing tying up a air monitoring at school program. And this is also partly, we are going to launch actually by the end of this month in Sabah, so that more people are aware the impact of climate change on children. This was actually a study that was done by UNICEF Malaysia, UKM, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, and University Malaysia Sabah. And one of the location was actually in Pulau Gaya, which is why we are taking the chance now to bring over the findings of this study in nicely printed books, and it will be launched by our representatives. Not a launch, but there will be an event by our UNICEF representative towards the end of this month. So there's one thing that I'd like to mention here. There is a UMS UNICEF C4D Center. So in UMS itself. So that stands for Communication for Development, or some says Social Behavior Change Communication. So that is in place, and we are working closely with Nutrition Department for more on how to impact families' eating habits, etc. Yeah. And one thing that I'm personally looking forward to, World Children's Day. I would like to remind everyone that that's one of the highlights of the year, World Children's Day, November 20th. And this year, I have heard that we will be doing some programs in Sabah, and that will be something that to look forward to, that to engage so that children can participate. And other things that we are always in discussion and looking for partners would be about the issues of children in plantation, also areas of early marriages, and ending violence against children. So it's also like a call out there for more feedback from people, stakeholders. If you're working in NGOs, we call them CSOs, or if you yourself are a NGI, that's a term that I heard is non-government individual, please reach out to UNICEF if it's issues concerning to mother and children. So basically, we connect with government agencies and the CSOs so that we are doing relevant programs that we can feed back into our national country program. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Dr. Elaine. One question for Jennifer. Jennifer, based on your experience on the ground, okay, the programs that are organized by UNICEF, how effective is it in changing lives in Sabah? That's my question. Thanks.
I think I'll give you a couple of examples. Just Elaine mentioned the C4D, the Communications for Development. We started that because when we started looking at the undocumented children in Sabah, stateless children, the perception of the local towards children, the now that it's changed, right? You see, Zoe was telling about how the people are genuinely concerned because there's a change, there's awareness done, and not just undocumented children, but also children with disability, persons with disability, and things like that. I think when you have the data, when you have your partners on the ground, it's really easy, so much easier to do things that will, what was the word that you use, effectiveness of working. Yes, we need the money, but we also need people who have dedication and commitment. So I think the 4 years that I was with UNICEF and working a lot in Sabah and Sarawak is building the partnership with, especially with government agencies, different departments. Now that we can see, you have EPD on, you have you with UMS, you have with your with our Gaya Teachers College, education department, and things like that. It is so valuable for not just for Sabah, but for the whole country. But we also have to explain that in order for us, for UNICEF or any of the UN agencies to do work in Malaysia, they have to go through certain processes. It's not like, oh, UNICEF say want to come here and do something for Sabah. No, it has to go through EPU. Then after that, UPEN in Sabah. There's a good discussion on, where your targets, so that you get effective results. Your outcomes are powerful and impactful, and because we cannot mobilize so much money because we are in the upper and middle income country, but at the same time we can still rope in expertise, technical support. That I think is so much. That's why I'm saying not just the money, but actually the technical support and the knowledge, the value that other organizations that UNICEF can bring in. Like I think the OSCE study, the Out of Children study, was with the Stanford statistics department, if I'm not mistaken, a while ago. But these are the things that will bring value to Sabah. Yeah. So, I also had the experience to work with the ILO, International Labour Organization, and the British High Com contacted me to start off the future skills program in Sabah, and have to work with a partner in Sabah. So that is so effective and so powerful. And there's so many people, as though we was mentioning, they're good NGOs, very vibrant. But we also need to have that, we can fundraise money, but when we need people with dedication, technical knowledge, and able to work together, right? So I really hope that more government agencies opening up their doors to work with the agencies, more NGOs, CSOs are able to build relationships, because there's so much we can do together. And for us, I always think about Sabah, the standards, the legal framework, the standards that we want to develop Sabah. You have the global educations coming in, sustainability in terms of environment, so impact of climate change. All these things really, you can really feel it in Sabah. Small changes you can feel, like flooding and climate change and things like that. And especially when we talk about the undocumented children, that's just such a big deal in Sabah. But you know, what do we do? All right. So that's why we need to bring in people with expertise and those who have experience doing it in different countries. We can't do it just even not even just Malaysia, because we're talking about different countries, and the best agency, the best platform will be using our UN friends or UNHCR with experience and already have country offices in the countries that we're dealing with the Philippines and Indonesia. And that's why we need UN to come in and help us more, especially dealing with sensitive issues like the stateless, undocumented, and our migrant children. So I think I love to look forward to the future. We've gone through 2 years of stress and life-changing phase, right? So I look forward to see more programs in Sabah with children and the women. We didn't even talk about the gender issue, right? 30% nowhere near when it comes to women in leadership and things like that, which the UN actually has a lot of programs, right? So thank you so much. I think I've covered that question that you have, Philip. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks so much, Jennifer. We only have 5 more minutes, so I think a question. Maybe we can cue the question on the screen. Okay, yeah, this is the question. Give solution to the ravages by children without paper. It's a lot of children without paper. So maybe you all can, maybe somebody volunteer, and then maybe 2% just on this question. Thanks. Zoe, you want to try? Or Dr. Elaine?
I'll just
If
say a
not,
very quick word. It's just that, UNICEF, we work for every child. And so, yes, we are always very conscious about the disparity, which why Jennifer mentioned in the beginning. So every program we have, we not say we don't try, we actually make sure that, all marginalized children, that the programs are available, their inclusion. So for children of all different sort of community, society, and also those with disabilities. So I just want to say that yes, if it's bring to our attention, and even in areas. So right now we are also focusing some work on the East Coast where previously we may not have gone to. So yes, we are very conscious of that, but sometimes this takes time, and also looking for the right partners, because you see we don't actually do the groundwork ourselves, so it's looking for the right committed partners as well. Over.
okay, Jennifer, maybe your quick thought on this question by
Okay.
Golden Hemo.
Okay. As I mentioned quite a number of times, that the issue on undocumented or children without paper is such a sensitive issue. It can make or break. For me, coming from my other hat as a politician, we know that it will make or break us. But as a human being, person, as my training on human rights, every child deserves to have an identity to start with. Without identity, they have no access to education, no access to healthcare, nothing, right? They're just a nobody. And we know, as I mentioned earlier, if we don't do anything, the cost of our inaction now will bring a huge impact in the future. So, if you ask me, because I've seen rough data when we were doing the study on out of school children in Sabah, we don't even know how many children without paper in Sabah. There's nobody doing the study. Maybe there's some, but incomplete study. But the most important thing is, what do we do? Do we give them? We must give them a proof of birth, but people must, again, changing of perception, people must understand giving a piece of paper identity to a child doesn't mean we are giving citizenship. That's the local perception of, wow, you're taking care of so no, we have to look at every child as a person who has a right to have an identity and safe space, right? So, I wear many hats, but I think when it comes to children, we shouldn't have to compromise.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. I just would like to add, in terms of this, as a Sabahan, yes, I agree with Jennifer. The issue of the stateless children is like you're holding a dynamite that has been ignited, and if you're holding it, and if you're not lucky, it will blow up at your face. So many politicians, either they tiptoe over this subject, or they exploit the subject to win vote, or to make their opponent look bad. Okay, I would like to end the forum in a positive note. I think I would like to thank UNICEF for helping Sabah in terms of our mothers and our children. I would like to say thanks to them. And I would like to, on behalf of Kupi-Kupi FM, which is an awesome radio station in Sabah, and also Sabah Way Forward, which is a movement to create awareness that Sabah can go forward. I would like to thank Dr. Elaine Kong, Zoe Gunn, both of them are from UNICEF, and also Jennifer Lasibang, who is apa tu, UNICEF, or going to be working again for UNICEF, or always working for UNICEF. Okay, everybody, thanks so much. Yeah, it was a really great session for me. Awesome. Okay, bye bye.